there seems to be a connection between what's going on in the United States in terms of in terms of your interest in what I would consider part of our Nordic welfare system, right? And the Yang campaign. So, how do you have view of this correlation between Andrew Yang and our Nordic mix of capitalism and socialism? What's that connection? Was that a very big question?
Well, it's an interesting one. I actually think that Yang's inspiration is closer to home. I think the oil dividend that they have in Alaska is a case study that he, I think, found very convincing. And then the notion of a basic income or a citizen's dividend has been with America since like the founding of the country with Thomas Paine, and then Martin Luther King had been an advocate, and then even Richard Nixon, the Republican president, had advocated it for different reasons. And then Milton Friedman, the Nobel-winning economist from the 80s, was an advocate as well. So I think that this idea is more rooted in maybe a little bit of libertarianism, as well as acknowledgement that something's not working, such that the traditional Democratic Party solutions may not be appropriate. Now, it may turn out that it ends up having some similarity to the Nordic models, but I don't think that that's sort of the reference model that Yang is using.
No.
And then to add further complication, that would not be a selling point for an American election.
I see what you're saying, and yet Bernie has enjoyed tremendous support, and he refers to it sometimes to the Nordic model.
Yeah. No, he will, but not all. It's not in every speech.
No.
And a very common response that is, in my opinion, not very convincing, but it is effective nonetheless. Is people will say, well, but this is America. We're not Norway. This is not Denmark.
Yeah.
And then they try and shut the conversation down that way. So one of the things about America is we are an extremely patriotic, nationalistic country, where it's very common to see the American flag flying everywhere. Now, if you go to Finland or somewhere else, you may not see this outward display of nationalism.
I think you are underestimating the nationalism in all of Europe. Right?
So maybe it's resurging, but it's certainly at the U.S. level, any idea that does not come from the U.S. is dismissed. It may be dismissed prematurely. And so maybe that's also true on the other way around, but I can for sure tell you that if you wanted to convince a bunch of American voters to do something, the last thing you would say is well, they do this in France.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, yeah. Definitely.
And maybe that would be true. That would be true in the rest of Europe too. You may not want to kind of play up any French association. But yeah, I do think at the end of the day, the commonality is that the free market has great powers, but it doesn't solve all your problems. It's really good at allocating capital, and it's really good at wringing out efficiency for shareholders, but it may not result in a healthier country overall.
So to take Milton Friedman's favorite example, the market is very good at finding out how to cheapest produce a pencil in the most efficient way, right? But it's not necessarily the best at finding out how to, distribute the wealth produced from this production of the pencil, from the firms and all the workers participating in that process. The market has some issues with that. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, the market cares about efficiency and marginal return for your dollar.
Yeah.
It does not care if buying this pencil is good for the person working in the factory, or if buying this pencil actually comes from a completely automated factory where there were no humans, or where you're cutting down trees and causing all kinds of climate effects. Like, the market is very imperfect, and economists have known about this for a long time.
Yeah.
And they've talked about negative externalities and all of these problems with like public goods, and but most Americans, they don't want to go into that level of detail. It's much more comfortable to say we're about freedom.
Yeah.
We are about capitalism. We are against socialism. We are against communism. End of story.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. But maybe part of the story that the U.S. has to write now, the next chapter of that story, has to be some kind of reconciliation with the fact that the market doesn't solve all societal problems. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah, and Yang is trying to make that case too, but it's a delicate balancing act, because if you, in a weird way, the market is America's second religion. Anyone who criticizes the market, it's as if you told my mother like the Immaculate Conception did not happen. Like, it's a very very hard conversation when people say, "What are you talking about? You must be a communist if you have any criticism of the market." So, but I agree with you. We have to look at it eyes wide open and acknowledge there are many examples where the market is not benefiting the citizens. But it quickly, the political opponents will quickly just slap a label on you and say you're a socialist.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So, the election is fake. Do you think that a Bernie or a Biden is positioned to win, or does a prospect such as Andrew Yang still have a chance?
I think, interestingly, I actually think Bernie would have a better shot at Trump than Biden. I think Biden would be very much like a repeat of Hillary. And Warren. So Biden would be a repeat of Hillary because his policies don't resonate with the people who feel like there's a fundamental problem with the country. His policies resonate with people who are doing pretty well and just don't want any change. They want to go back. They just want to turn the clock back to 2015 and make believe Trump never happened. And then Warren is a repeat of Hillary because I think she as a campaigner will have trouble with independents, and certainly I think she might activate a lot of Trump voters because of their perhaps inherent sexism, conscious or not. But also, like, Warren is not a very warm person. Her affect is very professorial and very, a little bit, in my opinion, a little judgmental. Like, I know better than you. I will solve your problems. And so Yang, I think, has a way better chance in the general than he would in the primaries, which is sad. But that's the way I
sad. Yeah, I get what you're saying. So, so my last question would be, in the context of what you've just said, so what is the relationship between, identity politics right now in America, which has, had this major resurgence, as it were, and then, the economic and political problems that are characterizing the nation?
Oh, I think they go hand in hand. I think when people have less money and they have more anxiety about their economic prospects, it is only natural to start wondering, well, maybe it's this other tribe that is the cause of my problems. And it's very convenient. And it makes you feel good because it means, oh, it's not my problem. It's those Mexicans, or it's those Chinese, or it's those Russians, whatever, someone. But just not me, and not the great American free market. That can never be the problem. And so I think this is they kind of feed on each other. And there's positive identity politics and maybe negative. And maybe the positive side is that, in this case for Yang, I think it's great that for a country that has had Asian Americans living in the borders and as citizens for over 100 years, it's about time. It's about time that we've had a presidential candidate make it this far has an Asian American background.
Yeah.
But I think on the other hand, if you look at a lot of the Trump supporters would talk about the imminent crossover point where white Americans will be a minority. Now, if you go back to our sort of 1950s analogy, when America was on top of the world, well, that was true. But also, who in America was on top of the country? It was the white American male. And this was, you kind of entered the race in the lead position. Let's just say that.
Yeah,
and
I see.
They know that's not true anymore, and and a lot of people are fine with it. Most white Americans are fine with it, but there are some. I mean, you look at the rally in Virginia, and you look at the talk about being replaced by other people and the American culture and the white European values. This is part. If those groups were doing well in life and had great economic prospects and felt like they had a great future, they would be less likely to talk about these things. But I think part of it is they kind of go together: the economic challenges and the identity, kind of tribalism.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So there is also a cultural or identity politics aspect of the economic discussion, right?
Yeah, the one exacerbates the other.
Yeah. So the last question I'm going to ask you is, so do you think this, I would say, this toxic branch or toxic form of identity politics, that some part of the democratic discussion has been conditioned by, or has been based on, for instance, when Senator Warren says to Bernie Sanders, you're a sexist because many years ago you said to me that a woman couldn't be president of the United States, and then Bernie has to respond, like, that's a sexist assumption because I would never say that, blah blah blah. Do you think that that's part of what is alienating, this other base of the American electorate, this other part of the American electorate that Yang has his eyes on? And is that a huge problem?
Yeah, it's very it's a big turn off for a lot of, let's just call them independents and moderates and people that are concerned about the big problems facing the country. And they feel like not only is it divisive, but it's also that the media purposely plays up this narrative because it's a better story to tell. And like CNN is not going to run a front page story about the stagnant median income of Midwestern American workers. They won't. But they will definitely show a video of the hot mic moment of Warren saying to Bernie, "So you called me a liar."
Yeah.
And it's not CNN's fault, because I bet you any money the click-through rate and the likelihood of being able to show an ad on the scandalous "you called me a liar" article will be way higher than any economic graphs or charts about what's facing, or climate change. Unfortunately, people want to talk about stuff that is emotionally charged. I mean, it's not just America. I mean, look all this attention about the royal family in the UK. Like, really? Is that the biggest problem facing the UK, that Meghan Markle wants to live in Canada? Who cares? They have bigger issues, but it's more fun, I guess, for many people to talk about that because it's relatable. It's part of the human condition about trust and honesty and tension. And so I don't blame people for being interested in that. I just worry that it sucks up all the oxygen.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. To an extent, we live in an age of spectacle instead of an age of reason, right? So, but do you think that in order to make America think harder, we have to turn away from identity politics? Is that part of the solution?
I think the real solution is we have to acknowledge that groups in America and the rest of the society have been treated unfairly, and we shouldn't sort of like sweep it under the rug. But we cannot let that define every conversation we have, because then it just turns into this like circular firing range, and no one will get anything done. And I would hope that we can focus on the problems affecting all of us, and solve them, and then argue about our tribal differences maybe 20% of the time. I think it's like we just have to acknowledge it, and I think that's what Yang tries to do. He tries to say, "Hey, look, I'm the only person of color on this stage. That's crazy." But then he pivots it into like part of the reason is that the whole system rewards people who have financial resources, and people of color often don't. You know, so I think you got to do a little bit. You have to acknowledge it. You have to, sort of speak to it, but then ideally focus on the problems that affect everybody.
Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah. I want 1,000 a month, 1,000 a month. I want 1,000 a month, 1,000 a month. Let's get this bread. Freedom dividend. Are all y'all paying attention? Automation gonna sweep the nation unless we get him in. Andrew Yang 2020 freedom dividend. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah. First we get this money, then on 420 he gonna give some high fives to some high guys. Decriminalize marijuana so we can smoke if we wanna. Down with the opioid trend, up with the mental health thing. Yeah, math, yo, it's just math. Yo, it's simple math. Yo, can you do math? Yo, yo. Eliminate super PACs, college stars making stacks, student loan forgiveness plan, cops wearing cameras, and climate change is real again. Science rules, teachers bringing home some bread, Medicare for every citizen. Andrew Yang 2020 freedom dividend. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah. Yo, a vote for anyone else is like negative $1,000 from your pocket every month.